The world doesn't reward goodness, it rewards usefulness. You were told to be kind, to work hard, to play fair. From childhood, you were fed the story that morality guarantees justice, that if you keep your head down, give your best, and stay loyal, life will eventually pay you back. But one day, life didn't. You gave everything to people who walked away. You stayed when others would have left, only to be forgotten. And slowly, something inside you started to break, not from failure, but from confusion. How could doing everything right feel so wrong? Here's the truth. No one told you you're not losing because you're not good enough. You're losing because you're still playing a game you don't understand. A game where the rules aren't written in virtue, but in strategy. You thought the world was a system of fairness, but it's a system of leverage. And Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. Being good is not a strategy. It's a baseline expectation. You don't earn safety or loyalty from it. You merely become the most convenient person to exploit. Those who rise in this world aren't always the most talented or kind-hearted. They're the ones who recognize the game and learn to bend it quietly. They're the ones who understand timing, image, silence, and control. And while you were working late, hoping to be noticed, someone else was curating influence. If you're still chasing fairness, still hoping your effort will speak for itself, pause. Because silence doesn't reward merit. It rewards positioning. The hard truth. Goodness isn't what gets you ahead. Awareness does, and strategy keeps you there. Look around how many kind people have been overlooked, dismissed, or discarded, not because they lacked value, but because they didn't assert that value. The world doesn't see your heart unless it's wrapped in presence. And that presence doesn't come from people-pleasing or over-explaining. It comes from learning how power moves quietly, intentionally, and without apology. This isn't about becoming cruel, it's about becoming clear. If you want to stop being crushed, you must stop living like someone who's waiting to be saved. The world is not a mirror of your goodness, it's a reflection of your positioning. And until you learn to play the game will keep playing you. So begin here, not with shame, not with guilt, but with strategy. Understand that fairness is a bedtime story told to keep you docile. But clarity, that's the real beginning of power. And from that clarity, you don't just survive, you design the life they said you'd never be ruthless enough to claim. You weren't betrayed because you were weak. You were betrayed because you were unguarded. We've all been taught that kindness is a virtue, that if you give your best offer, your heart, and stay loyal, life will reward you. But what happens when that kindness is met with silence, with betrayal, with people who take all that you offer and walk away as if it meant nothing? Here's the brutal truth. Kindness without boundaries is not virtue. It's vulnerability waiting to be weaponized, and in the wrong hands, it always is. You weren't broken because you were kind. You were broken because you believed your kindness guaranteed safety. You thought giving more would make you more valuable. You thought patience would be appreciated. You thought forgiveness would be enough. But what no one told you is that in a world ruled by advantage, unconditional kindness is often seen as permission. Permission to use you, to dismiss you, to exploit the very softness that should have been protected. Machiavelli understood something we forget. The world does not operate on fairness. It operates on leverage, on perception, on power dynamics. And when you give your loyalty without requiring respect, when you give second, third, and fourth chances without consequence, you train people to treat you like you're disposable. They don't value what they didn't earn. They don't cherish what they didn't struggle to keep. And they certainly don't stay loyal to someone who never says enough. Ask yourself, how many times have you swallowed your pain just to keep the peace? How often have you stayed quiet while your spirit broke in silence? You called it being a good person, but really it was fear. Fear of being seen as cold, harsh, or selfish. So you kept giving, and they kept taking. But kindness, real kindness, has a backbone. It says, I love deeply, but I walk when I'm disrespected. It says I give, but not at the cost of my soul. It says I forgive, but I don't forget who you became when you thought I'd never leave. There is no nobility in being used. There is no glory in being emotionally bankrupt. If your kindness is costing you your peace, your self-worth, or your sanity, then it's not kindness anymore, it's self-abandonment. This is not a call to be cruel, it's a call to be clear, to be firm, to realize that you are not responsible for teaching others how to love you while they're destroying you. Your job is not to bleed quietly and hope someone notices. Your job is to protect your value, because if you don't, no one else will. And once you understand that, you'll never apologize for drawing the line again. They expect your outrage. Disappoint them with silence. In a world addicted to noise where every grievance is posted, every emotion spilled, and every reaction magnified, silence feels unnatural, dangerous even. But that's precisely why it's powerful. Silence is not absence. It's precision. It's control. It's the language of those who don't need to shout to be heard. Think about it. How many times have you been pushed, provoked, baited into reacting only to feel emptier, weaker afterward? Because every time you over-explain, over-apologize, or emotionally unravel, you hand someone else the script to your power. They know what gets to you. They know how to trigger you, and that knowledge becomes leverage. But when you withhold that reaction, when you refuse to give them your fire, they're left grasping in the dark. This isn't about emotional suppression. It's about emotional direction. You are allowed to feel everything: rage, betrayal, heartbreak. But you are not obligated to perform it. The world has taught you that silence is weakness, that speaking out is strength, that expressing everything all the time makes you authentic. But let's be honest, when has vulnerability ever protected you in a ruthless negotiation? When has your honesty ever softened the heart of someone bent on control? When has emotional transparency ever stopped someone from using your pain against you? Machiavelli didn't condemn emotion. He warned against its exposure, because what's visible becomes predictable, and what's predictable becomes exploitable. In the game of power, visibility is liability. The moment they know what you fear, they know how to push you. The moment they know what you love, they know how to twist it. But when you're unreadable, you become untouchable. Silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty breeds caution. You don't owe the world a reaction. Not every insult deserves a rebuttal. Not every betrayal deserves your tears. Sometimes the most violent response is no response at all, because silence forces others to sit with their actions. It denies them the satisfaction of seeing you collapse. And in that stillness, power grows. The world expects you to explain yourself, to defend, to plead, so when you refuse to play the game, they panic. You become an enigma, a threat they can't categorize. And that mystery, it's magnetic. It shifts power without a word. This is why the strongest presence is often the quietest one in the room. Not because it lacks emotion, but because it refuses to spend it recklessly. Silence held with clarity becomes a sword. It's the pause that makes others speak first. It's the restraint that makes others rethink their attack. And most importantly, it's the shield that protects your energy. So the next time someone disrespects you, don't argue. Withdraw. When they expect you to break, stay composed. When they expect you to explain, stay still. Not because you're afraid, but because you understand something they don't. Power isn't loud, it whispers, and it always belongs to the one who doesn't flinch. You don't rise by being real. You rise by being believed. Let's cut through the illusion. The world doesn't reward truth. It rewards perception. You've been taught to believe that if you work hard enough, stay honest, and let your actions speak for themselves, you'll eventually get the recognition you deserve. But look around. That's not how this world works. The loudest voices aren't always the wisest. The most successful aren't always the most skilled. Why? Because perception is power, and whoever controls it controls the game. It's brutal, but it's real. People don't treat you based on who you are. They treat you based on who they think you are. And unless you learn to shape that perception, someone else will shape it for you, and always to your disadvantage. This is not about lying. It's not about manipulation for manipulation's sake. It's about understanding the deeper currency of influence belief. People follow confidence, not competence. They rally behind those who appear certain, not those who quietly carry the truth. And in a world flooded with noise, truth doesn't rise on its own. It has to be framed, packaged, delivered like a performance. That's the Machiavellian principle. It's not enough to be powerful, you must appear powerful. How many good, honest people have been overlooked because they didn't know how to present themselves? How many skilled creators, professionals, and thinkers have been left behind? Not because they lacked substance, but because they lacked strategy. The world doesn't pause to look deeper. It makes snap judgments. And if your image doesn't speak before you do, you've already lost ground. So, what does it look like to control perception? It starts with intentional silence, with being selective about what you reveal and when, with walking into a room and letting your presence speak before your words do. It means creating an aura around you, a sense that you know something others don't, that you see further, feel deeper, hold something back that could shift the entire conversation. And that mystery, it's magnetic. It's not about arrogance. It's about design. Curate the way you're seen. Control the narrative. Don't overshare your failures. Don't apologize for your ambition. Don't perform your authenticity for people who haven't earned your story. Build a perception that reflects your value strategically, unapologetically. The truth is, if you don't define your image, the world will. And the world will always reduce you to something easier to control, easier to ignore. But when you craft your presence with precision, people respond differently. They hesitate. They listen more. They question what they can't immediately categorize. That's power. Not the kind that screams, the kind that bends the room around it. So stop waiting to be seen for who you really are. Start shaping how the world sees you. Say less, but say it sharper. Show less, but show it stronger. Speak rarely, but when you do, let every word carry weight. Because in this world, perception is armor, and if you wear it well, you won't need to defend yourself. You'll already be protected. Self-abandonment, the most dangerous betrayal, is the one you do to yourself. There comes a moment in life, quiet, devastating, when you realize the person who's been betraying you is you. Not the one who left you, not the one who lied, but the part of you that stayed silent when your soul was screaming. The part that swallowed your pain just to keep the peace. The part that told you, it's not that bad even when it was destroying you. This is self-abandonment. And it is the final, most insidious trap. You can leave toxic people. You can escape manipulative systems. But until you stop betraying yourself in the small, invisible moments, until you stop offering your spirit on the altar of survival, you are not free. You're just playing a quieter kind of captivity. It often starts in childhood. Maybe you were taught that being good meant not having needs. Maybe love came with a condition: be useful, be agreeable, don't make anyone uncomfortable. And so you learned to split off from your own voice. You learned that survival meant disappearing a little more every day. But here's the brutal truth. That training didn't end when you became an adult. It just went underground. Now it shows up every time you downplay your achievements, every time you ignore red flags, every time you say yes when your body says no, every time you punish yourself for being too much or not enough. It shows up in your self-talk, the quiet insults, the harsh judgments, the way you shame yourself for feeling anything at all. This is what no one told you. The enemy isn't always outside. Sometimes it's the internalized voice of someone who taught you your needs were a burden. That voice doesn't scream, it whispers. Don't make a scene. Just get over it. You're too sensitive. And we listen, we obey, we silence our pain with logic, we justify mistreatment, we become masters at betrayal of ourselves. And we don't even know we're doing it. But self-abandonment is not neutral. It has a cost. Over time, your soul begins to rot under the weight of all that suppression. The depression creeps in. The anxiety tightens its grip. You become a stranger to yourself. You stop trusting your own instincts. You become afraid of your own feelings. You numb. You overfunction. You underlive, and the world doesn't notice because on the outside, you're still performing. You're still helpful, still agreeable, still strong, but inside, you're bleeding silently. Machiavelli warned us, nobility without strategy is submission, and nowhere is that truer than in the ways we self-abandon. The world will exploit your silence. It will feed off your willingness to disappear. If you do not choose yourself, it will never choose you. But here's the good news. You can stop. You can begin again, this time with loyalty to yourself. You can reparent the parts of you that were taught to stay small. You can learn to listen when your gut says, leave, rest, or speak. You can choose to sit with your pain instead of shaming it. You can stop asking, am I too much, and start asking, who taught me that I had to shrink to be loved? Healing is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to abandon yourself. And no, this isn't easy. Choosing yourself, really choosing yourself, is terrifying. It might mean walking away from what's familiar. It might mean disappointing others. It might mean grieving the years you lost to self-betrayal. But it also means liberation. It means becoming the kind of person who backs themselves even when no one else does. It means building an inner world that feels safe, kind, and deeply loyal to you. Because in the end, your power doesn't come from how much you give others. It comes from how fiercely you refuse to give yourself away. The world doesn't need more people who've perfected the art of disappearing. It needs people who've mastered the art of returning to themselves. Self-love. Rooted in awareness, the pathway to true freedom. There's a kind of love the world rarely teaches you to offer, and it's the only kind that can truly set you free. Not the love you pour into others, not the romantic kind that burns bright and fizzles fast, not the performative kindness you give away to be liked or accepted. No, the love that changes everything is the one you learn to give yourself consciously, deliberately, and without condition. This is not the cliché self-care mantra splashed across Instagram. It's not bubble baths or affirmations whispered through gritted teeth. It's the kind of love that begins when you finally see yourself, not the mask you wear, not the role you play, but the wounded, wise, worthy human underneath all the survival. And this kind of love only grows in the soil of awareness. You cannot truly love yourself if you are still at war with your own truth. If you still confuse productivity with worth. If you still shame your past, dismiss your pain, or negotiate your value for crumbs of acceptance. You cannot love yourself while denying yourself at the same time. Awareness is the awakening, the piercing realization that your suffering wasn't a sign of brokenness, but of betrayal. Not just betrayal by others, but by the systems that raised you, the roles you were forced into, and the lies you inherited about what makes you worthy. Maybe you were taught that love is earned, that being selfless makes you good, that to be loved you had to be less loud, less needy, less difficult. So you adapted. You disconnected. You silenced parts of yourself just to be acceptable. But adaptation is not healing. It is camouflage, and camouflage might protect you, but it also keeps you from being seen. Real healing, the kind that makes you magnetic, unshakable, untouchable, starts with radical self-awareness. It starts when you pause and ask, whose voice is this in my head? Who told me I had to be perfect to be loved? Whose pain am I carrying that isn't mine to hold? When you become aware, you stop performing. You stop pleasing. You stop sacrificing yourself to prove your value. And in that space, something sacred begins to grow, self-love that doesn't flinch. It doesn't flinch when someone disapproves. It doesn't disappear when someone walks away. It doesn't collapse under criticism or contort itself to be chosen. It simply stands with clarity, with power, with compassion, because it knows that love is not something you chase. It's something you return to within yourself. This kind of self-love doesn't mean you're always confident or never afraid. It means you're anchored. It means you have your own back even when the world turns cold. It means you know the difference between guilt and growth, between silence and peace, between loneliness and sacred solitude. It means you love yourself not because you're perfect, but because you've stopped pretending that perfection was ever required. Machiavelli once warned us about blind obedience, about systems that manipulate through illusion. And in a way, The most dangerous illusion is the one that tells you to earn your worth through suffering. But you don't have to suffer to be worthy. You don't have to shrink to be safe. You don't have to betray yourself to be loved. When love becomes awareness, it also becomes your sword. You begin to cut through the noise. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop begging to be seen. You choose peace over performance. And in that peace, your freedom is born. The kind of freedom that no one can give you. The kind you don't have to beg for. The kind you no longer sacrifice your truth to maintain. That freedom lives in the quiet moments when you choose yourself. When you whisper to the inner child, still waiting to be rescued, you were never too much. You were just too aware for a world that needed you to stay asleep. But you're awake now, and self-love rooted in awareness. That's not weakness, that's revolution. The final awakening. Reclaiming power through inner clarity and emotional discipline. There comes a moment in every person's life when the mirror stops lying. When the stories we were told about love, about loyalty, about what it means to be good, begin to fall apart. And standing there in the wreckage of those illusions, we're left with a choice. Continue to perform a role written for someone else, or rewrite the script entirely. This moment is not gentle. It's not poetic or pretty. It's often brutal, but it's also the beginning of real freedom. For most of us, we were trained to believe that virtue lies in compliance, that if we just stayed kind enough, small enough, forgiving enough, the world would eventually reward us. But what no one told us is that in a world built on strategy, goodness without clarity becomes exploitation. And that's the truth. Machiavelli understood so well, not that people must be cruel to survive, but that people must be conscious. Emotional discipline isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming clear. It's about learning to feel deeply while choosing how and when to reveal those feelings. It's about no longer letting the world pull your strings simply because you were never taught where your edges are. Because here's the brutal reality, people do not always respond to your goodness with gratitude. They respond to your boundaries with respect. And where there are no boundaries, there is no protection. This isn't a lesson taught in school. It's the one you learn in the silence after betrayal, in the ache of giving too much, in the numbness that follows years of emotional overexposure. And once you learn it, you cannot unlearn it. You start to realize that self-protection is not selfish. It's sacred. Clarity becomes your armor. Stillness becomes your weapon. You stop explaining your worth and start embodying it. You stop apologizing for your truth and begin honoring it like Scripture. Because when you finally become aware, truly aware, you see the game for what it is. And it changes you. You begin to speak less, but mean more. You act slower, but with precision. You forgive, but never forget. You can still be kind, but never again easy. This is the shift from survival to strategy, from innocence to intelligence, from self-abandonment to self-respect. It doesn't happen overnight. At first, it feels like loss, the loss of comfort, the loss of certainty, the loss of illusions you clung to like lifelines. But in truth, you are shedding what was never yours to carry. You are burning down the stories that kept you small so you can finally build a life that fits who you actually are, not the wounded version of you, not the obedient child you used to be, but the awakened, grounded, dangerously clear adult you are becoming. And that clarity, that's what makes you untouchable. Because when you stop reacting, they can't control you. When you stop explaining, they can't undermine you. When you stop chasing, they begin to wonder what you found that made their validation irrelevant. What you found is you. And that discovery is everything. Machiavelli said power belongs to those who understand perception, but the deepest perception you'll ever master is your own. When you can stand still in the face of chaos, not because you don't feel it, but because you no longer fear it, you become unbreakable. That is real power. Not dominance over others, but sovereignty over yourself. So if you're tired of being misunderstood, disrespected, or unseen, stop asking the world to see you. Start seeing yourself with clarity, with compassion, with the unapologetic wisdom of someone who has finally remembered who they were before the world tried to reshape them. This is not about revenge, it's about reclamation. You are not here to please, you are here to own your space, silently, deliberately, powerfully. And from that silence, a new kind of voice will rise, one that doesn't need to shout, one that doesn't beg to be heard, one that simply is, unshakable, grounded, free. Life doesn't reward goodness, it rewards awareness. We've been taught that if we just stay kind, work hard, and keep our heads down, life will eventually be fair. But the hard truth is it won't. Not because you're not enough, but because you were never taught the rules of the game. You were taught how to obey, not how to protect your spirit. You gave your time, loyalty, and heart, freely expecting the world to honor that. But the world doesn't reward open hearts. It rewards strategic minds. This isn't a call to become bitter, it's a call to become awake. Real strength is not in being endlessly kind. It's in being kind with boundaries, forgiving with discernment, loyal with leverage. If your goodness is not guarded, it becomes currency in someone else's manipulation. And if your silence is not strategic, it becomes erasure. You don't need to abandon your values. You need to protect them. With clarity, with presence, with a quiet authority that refuses to be used. In a culture that rewards performance over authenticity, emotional discipline is your superpower. When you stop oversharing, when you stop reacting on command, when you choose stillness over noise, people begin to notice and respect. So don't wait for the world to reward you for being good. Start rewarding yourself for becoming wise. Learn to walk away quietly. Learn to say no without guilt. Learn to let others wonder what you're thinking. That mystery, that silence, that's power. The kind that doesn't scream but cannot be ignored. Because in a world that often mistakes softness for weakness, the most dangerous thing you can be is deeply kind and profoundly clear.